And good afternoon, everybody. It's today, October 1st. It's our LunchNLearn series. I think this is our third one that it goes right along with the series that we started around pure leadership, looking at our behaviors and habits around what we do as leaders and how to lay down a foundation that is rock solid upon which we can build. I would say today's talk around dialing to the right is probably one of the most consequential learnings you will learn in this program, and we will talk about it as we go forward on our one-to-one sessions, because there's nothing I can do today to really get this point across and finish something. This is an ongoing effort, just like all the other things. So it is important that we sink our teeth into it and we start developing an understanding of this, of the dial to the right program itself. Long and short of it is this, is that we are all working very hard and we tend to have our plates full. There's a lot of doing that takes place just by default, because that's what our comfort zone is, that's what we have been doing. Our objective dial to the right is to create an additional 8 hours of space in the calendar by looking at what it is that you do today and ask yourself the questions: do I need to do this? Is this value adding? Or just a repetitive motion, or is this regulatory required? And through that process of discovery, we're going to make an attempt to really be strategic about dialing to the right. In other words, finding the people on our team, the right people on our team to take on additional responsibilities, or to remove non-value added time, or to manage your time more effectively. So you have the opportunity to spend enough time in each of the sectors, each of the quadrants that I will be laying out. So I sent the presentation to all of you beforehand, so you can, if you have it, great. If you had an opportunity to print it out, even better. But if you did not, that's okay. All you need to be able to do is draw a circle and put a cross through it as we go through the program to kind of get a better understanding of what it is that you need to do over the next weeks to come as we do our one-to-one sessions, to identify and find that time on the calendar that that creates a greater efficiency in your life, work life, but also that creates a work-life balance, right? Is that we want to make sure we work on the right things that are truly value adding. So with that said, the presentation today will be a little longer than 7 to 10 minutes of talking and then discussion. I thought this was the right time to introduce this to you, as we are going through the first two steps of learning to lead with confident humility, the conversation of being responsible as a leader. This is part of being responsible as a leader, working on the right things at the right time. Of course, next week we're going to introduce to you the concept of motivation with fierce resolve, followed after that with partnering. And the cool thing is that all four of these are very much part of is dialing to the right. You have to exercise each one of these strategies and actions in order to get the most out of it. So without further ado, let's get started and make sure that my slides are working and we are up and running. So what is a leader supposed to do? And that's really a good question, is that many of us, and that's part of the reason why I created this, the company, the Dutch Mentor, are literally thrust into leadership roles because we were high-performing, high-potential employees or team members who either stepped up when somebody left into interim roles, or when the opportunity arose, we were selected to go into a leadership role. But too often we are not really given the insight, the training, the skills, knowledge, and abilities to lead. So our default action of a leader in that type of a position is to do a lot, right? More than you probably should. So what is a leader supposed to do? I would love to hear a couple of comments. What do you think a leader is supposed to do?
Support the team.
Support the team.
With direction.
With direction.
Guide the process.
Guide the process. Vision.
Remove roadblocks.
Remove barriers. Inspire. Provide development. Access to training and development. Motivate. Right? These are all kind of key words that you think that belong to a leader itself. Is there a difference between leading and managing? So leaders lead people, and managing is managing a process. And we have to learn to differentiate between a process and people. Right? And leader, by definition, is somebody who is to inspire, who is there to bring the most out of people, who can look at things that need to be done today and prioritize and vision, but set clear goals and expectations and be a superior communicator and supporter in that process itself in order to be able to get the best out of the team, therefore drive performance, right? So managing is really about managing a process, and we need to learn the separation of the two as we progress to understanding what the 4 key roles really are and how to optimize that in your workflow. Now, all of you are coming from different backgrounds in different departments for the most part. So there's no one cookie cutter approach. So this is what the right balance is for you or for your team. But we'll go through a discovery process as you go from different levels, from let's say a site leader or a supervisor to a manager to a director to a senior director or vice president or above. How what you do every day as a leader will start changing ever so slightly, and that's something you have to take into account. You would expect that the CEO or the senior strategy officer of the company is spending a lot of time thinking about the future, while you might spend 1 or 2% of your time in that category, but a lot more on doing and improving. So let's go through these real quickly. That it is management is daily business operations, right? So that really with the day-to-day care of the business itself, that it is both people and process. So first, it is the goal is to get desired results. Well, those are set based on strategies and performance indicators. Often come from the top down, and then communicated from each level down and set as an expectation to reach these goals. There's a lot of doing that needs to be, right? That's where the rubber hits the road. The other thing is that, that's really where the bulk of the time is going to go. But as a leader, you can't have too much of your time of doing it yourself, because then it becomes a distraction. It takes away from the opportunity to getting better every day. And that's really right, maximizing the current opportunities, right? Their role is to build and maintain the capability to deliver current products and service competently, or improving upon it, getting better every single day. That's that continuous improvement cycle. The A3 thinking portion of the course, which will be coming next, speaks to this, right? It's learning how to take bite-sized pieces. I asked one of the students the other day, said, how do we eat an elephant? You can say, I can't eat an elephant. Well, you can eat an elephant 1 bite at a time, right? The same thing is that you have lots of problems or issues with processes in your institution or with your team. You can be truly overwhelmed by all of them, or you can relentlessly prioritize them and take them one at a time, a bite-sized piece at a time. Learning how to scope and improve is to come. That's part of that. The next thing is about capturing new opportunities, right? To build capability to execute a new organizational direction. As a leader, you have a responsibility to look at the marketplace itself. For the clinical people on the call, here is an opportunity. We have been working with, let's say, XYZ pump, and it's causing us to take 15 steps in order to set up an IV drip. But keeping an eye on the market itself and see where there might be an opportunity to streamline that operation to 5 steps, improve quality and safety, and therefore have more time to spend with the patient, which is really the value add part of the experience. That's what we call looking for opportunities, looking for new software, hardware, new processes, best practices. A portion of your time needs to be looking at that. So it's not the distant future, but it's the near future, right? 6 to 12 months, what can we get? And it's not always about, what can I buy, right? The next thing is about invent the future itself, is defining the organizational direction and enroll the teams. These are more the people who do planning and strategic thinking for the organization, who spend a lot of time in that 4th role. Although we all have some responsibility to play there. it is important that we keep an eye on what is going to happen in our industry. And as we know in healthcare, we are forever changing. We can be impacted by a COVID-19, for example, or we can be severely impacted by new rules in CMS or a payment structure. As some of you all know that, 1 week you're part of one of the largest healthcare plans, and the next day you're not. Right? That requires change. That requires foresight on see how you can overcome these without struggling or falling by the wayside. Now, you can boil this all down to the smallest level of the organization. So it doesn't have to be strategic and be large, hospital-wide or system-wide. Each one of you can identify responsibilities in your department, in your role in these 4 areas. And we can simplify, right? It is what do I do? And you can write it down, quadrant number 1. What do I do? What do I improve? Right? So D, I, improve, O for opportunity, and F for future. So those are the 4 quadrants you're going to be working in and identifying how much time you spend in each. And we're going to rebalance that as necessary. Any questions on this higher level oversight of dial to the right?
Could you repeat the acronym DOIF? That's what.
Sure. Yeah. So D is for doing. I is for improving.
Okay.
O is looking for opportunities, so that's short term. And F is looking for the future. What does the future look like? Do we need to make any significant changes in the way we do business?
Mm.
And I will get to that a few more times. And again, I will work one-on-one with you on this, but it is important that you have some understanding today coming out of this. This is a real opportunity for you to get to create space in your calendars. As we have discussed as a group or individually, time management is key, right? We can't just take on more and more and more because then your plate becomes so full that you lose efficiency. And then you start failing as a leader, and none of us want that, right? So this is really critical to that. So there are primary and secondary responsibilities that we have to recognize. There are things that we need to decide, we need to direct, execute, and deliver, and do. That's an expectation of a leader. Now, again, the extent of you deciding, directing, executing, deliver, and do is again different by position. Right? But that's the categories. The secondary part of the responsibility, not necessarily less important, is the assigning of responsibilities to clarify and provide resource and inform or leading through context, right? Explaining along the way. Here's a critical one: transfer of authority. This is something that we are not, this is not our innate strength, our competency. High-performing technical people who have grown up into up the ranks tend to want to do things rather than act as an advisor, a trainer, and a coach for a myriad of reasons. And we're going to learn on how to overcome that. You allow, support, develop, and observe, and then ensure accountability is by reviewing, measuring, recognizing, rewarding, and correcting. Again, that's part of motivating, part of being responsible as a leader. Again, accountability, again, is not one of our innate strengths. Some people are better than others, but accountability starts with self-accountability. And I've been talking about that, right? Is that when we look at our individual development plan, that's your journey map. When you start boiling down what do I want to do in the next year versus the next 3 years, next 5 years, setting up goals that you're going to make a commitment to, that commitment model, how to decide to get it. That's how you learn how to become accountable to self. Well, being accountable to yourself is one thing. Ensuring that other people are accountable to what is being asked of them comes with a behavioral capacity, as we call that, that if you are not good at having a conversation with people, again, we will talk about that when we motivating with fierce resolve. We talk about the 4 levels of escalation. Be as hard as you need to be, but as soft as you can be. And the approach of accountability by setting up that challenge. Again, these are all primary and secondary responsibilities as a leader, which, if you look at that, you can probably identify them, what you do today on a day-to-day basis. Any questions on this part? Okay, and again, we're gonna let it sink in over time. I'm not gonna spend too much time here on the transfer of ownership model. I just want to go quickly over it. This will be the tool that we were looking at one-to-one as you start identifying your team members, having the right people in the right role, who is most likely to succeed or be on your succession plan. So we can develop different strategies and different approaches for different people on the team. Each one of them becomes then an opportunity to give additional responsibilities, right? So the responsibility of ownership is really 4 levels, right? So it's the responsibility to deliver a vision and goals and separate goals versus tasks, right? Is to clarify the expectations in terms of desired results, not the activities that make a difference, right? We are result-oriented people. I think I've talked a little bit about the triangle, is that all of us have experiences based on the culture that we grew up in. Out of those experiences, we take actions, and out of those actions, we drive results. Now, if we want to drive different results, we have to go back by taking different actions. But I think as Einstein was supposed to have said one time that if you the same action over and over and over and expect a different outcome is the definition of insanity. All right, so we have to think about that for ourselves. If we want to elevate our performance, we have to look at the actions that we are taking. So there are 5 levels of authority of transfer, and I'll show that in the next slide. And we're going to be assessing a part of each person who works for you, their capability, their willingness, the risk, and the bandwidth, and where they stand in the risk versus trust equation. So one of the reasons, really 2 of the reasons that leaders who are doing and not leading in the appropriate style or enough of the time, they don't transfer their authority because it is often based on fear that if you give it to somebody else, they will not do it as well as you can do it. Therefore, your performance suffers in the eyes of your boss, which is really a perception, not a reality, especially if you have an open dialogue and understanding with your boss, right? You're going through this process together. It's allowing people, right, to perform and don't micromanage. So that, again, we have to be very mindful of that. People who are the doers of the team can be micromanagers. Now, even though you don't think you're a micromanager, does not mean you are not a micromanager. Which strategy could you use that we were taught a couple of weeks ago in order to see how your team is feeling and to assess if you're a micromanager? Which tool that we talked about that you get feedback from your team?
Okay, all right.
It's the assertive. Yes, right. So that's the assertive feedback loop, and it can be done on paper or the Survey Monkey. And you could ask that if you say in that sort of feedback, 360, right, from your boss to people who you work with on the same level, and 7 to 10 people below you, approximately. If you ask them the question, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses? You can even ask the questions, do you think that I'm a micromanager, or on what level do I micromanage? If that's what you want to know, very specific. Or again, if you ask the question, what are the 2 or 3 areas that I can improve upon? If you see 5 out of the 10 people write down that they feel that you're micromanaging, there's some truth to that. So it is, it's a discovery process, and getting feedback from your team is a really good way to analyze and assess if you are a micromanager. Now, don't fault yourself if you do. This is an opportunity to improve upon that, right? So there's no right, wrong, or indifferent. Providing support as necessary by removing barriers, right? That's a role of the leader, and I think David mentioned that earlier. Encourage the people to be actively involved and engaged in their own initiatives. That's that fear motivation piece, right? Going back to the intrinsic need of your employee to be part of something that they know and understand on the heart level. And then again, the accountability is to report back, to evaluate performance against expectations, to recognize reward, and to correct if as necessary. That's where the countermeasure comes in. And we'll learn more about that. Does that make sense from a high level? Right, there's a lot of information here, and there's no expectation you get it today. But I want you to start thinking about that as soon, in a couple of slides from now, we'll start looking at a couple of models, and that's where it really, you develop a deeper understanding for yourself. So the 5 levels of authority of transfer model is interesting for the simple fact that the authority with the leader, that's currently you are doing it, and we want to shift the goal is up to 8 hours worth of work that you have to your employee, to your team members. Now, David, you're in a unique position that you are a contributor, individual contributor with no team members per se, but you work for a very large system. And we can still take a good hard look at that. Maybe that's the opportunity for you as a project in the next module to take on to say, how can, what is it that we do? Do I need to do it? Can the system support me in any way so I can create more time on my calendar to be able to lead initiatives and do them more at a quicker pace, right? So you have to look at it again from your unique perspective. It's easy to say nobody can do it versus assessing if you can find people who might be interested. That can be from a leadership development standpoint, or that can be from a, just the fact that you have people who are in the roles who are authorized to do that, right? That's part of their job description. So again, initially is about level 1. There's no authority. They wait to be told what to do. Level 2 is subservient. Authority implement and supervises methods. Gather the information I want, and I will let you know which to implement. Right? There's still a lot of influence over. That's the directive part of the. And we want to shift this to the right over here. Right? We want to go from directing to coaching, and then full delegation where there's accountability and follow up. So you can see the natural progression from that. Right? So the next one is present your action plan, and with my input, go ahead. So there's still a check-in. But there's already some authority change from you to the person that working it. So there's still, you're hanging on to it. It's still 50-50 kind of like a relationship here. Now you're going to start shifting that it is more on them than you, but you are starting to become that motivated, that person is going to inspire and help set the vision and have their backs, right? Go ahead as long as you maintain a profit margin or whatever the key performance indicator is. At this point in time, right? So you give them the safety margin to go out and do, but there's a measurement that if you don't reach those goals. Now, again, we have to be really realistic about it, right? None of us became great overnight. It takes time to get there. So you can't expect it of your team members either. And ultimately speaking, when you start delegating the task that you fully empower your team member, go ahead and let me know what you did. That sounds kind of scary, but I think about that for now. How many tasks and things that you manage on a day-to-day basis, if you would just give it to somebody and not be involved in it, but expect that they just report back in a week on how they made out, that could be very nerve-wracking. I just like, Christine, I'm looking at it. You do the schedules for 16 techs. How about next week you turn that over to somebody else who's been there for many years and say, you're in charge of the schedules and task assignments. And let go of it completely and just report back and let me know how it went. Right? That things like that can cause anxiety because you have control over these things today, and you know, or you think you know best on how to get it done. But is it right? Is it the best way? Is there an opportunity here to be able to develop people to take on tasks that come off your plate that creates time for you to start improving processes or looking for new opportunities and implement new innovation in the organization itself. So next is really the risk versus trust. Each individual, you have to make an assessment of your team members to assess where you are with each person. Now, we talked a little bit about separating out worth, right, the personal value versus performance. And here too, you have to keep it checking it. Now, if you have people who you have low risk tolerance with and low trust at bottom left hand, that's not good, right? You have to ask yourself the question, why is that? And how can we improve upon it? Again, it's an opportunity to develop a genuine relationship, a partnership with that person to elevate them to the point where you can hopefully be in the top right-hand corner where there's high trust and you're willing to take that extra risk with that person. Now, just to, again, like everything else is a natural bell curve, we can have a synergistic relationship with everybody. But you don't want people on the low risk, low trust part of it, and just leave them there. Right? We have to do something about it. So next is the responsibilities, but that is the leaders, right? People who transfer their authority should validate the employee, separate trust from risk, that is that worth from performance, and ask for a risk solution. Interesting enough, look at the other side of the equation. It's exactly the same for the employee, because this is a two-way street, especially when you're going to shift authority from you through delegation to the other person. They too have to trust you, have high trust in a high risk situation that you will have their back, that you don't delegate something to them to go out and do, even if there's some accountability and report back action on that. But if they feel that you're going to throw them under the bus or not be part, if something does not go right, they say, listen, I'm to blame for this. Because on the end of the day, if you're the leader of an organization, anything happens at the organization, I am responsible. Right? Anything happens in your team, the first thing out of your mouth should be as a certain leader, I apologize, it's my fault. Right? It's not about placing blame on others. That's how you build trust. So think about that too, that this is very much of a two-way street of building a relationship with your team. All right, so the transfer model put all together is about responsibility, authority, allowing, and accountability. So this is not something you can be doing overnight. This is something that is very much part of relationship building. We'll dive deeper into that when we talk about building a genuine partnership, where you can have different levels of partnership with people, depending on the situation and what it is that you are asking for them. I mentioned, I think, earlier on about the Box 9 talent review. And I'll make that one of our talks on a Friday, maybe even as soon as next week. That part of assessing your team is to get a better understanding on where the team member is on the scale of high performing and high possibility. So are they likely to succeed? Are they likely to be promoted within the next 1 year, 1 to 3 years, or 3 to 5 years, 1 level or 2 levels up? If they're in that mode of box 1, 2, and 3, high potential, high performing, so they not only high potential, you can see that they are diamond in the rough, where they're starting to be shined, but they also have performance indicators that meet or exceed expectation. That's that box 1, 2, and 3. That's your next level performer that you should work with. Right? We owe it to them to start, giving them additional training and attention. It's very likely, and I won't speak for your bosses, but you're in this course because you're probably in that category 1, 2, and 3. That you have the indicators of being high performing, and you have high potential. So now it is time to engage those emerging leaders. And you have the same responsibility as part of succession planning. That those people are also the opportunity. I think somebody mentioned the other day a little bit about, we managing people or leading people and inspire people, that when we talk about those high performers, we have a natural tendency to go to our high performers on the team or the people that we like, and not necessarily the high performance, to give them things to do. We have to become very aware of that. So high performers on your team who are go-to people, if they feel over time that you just give them, and they don't feel equal love against that, or on the flip side, those high performers are being observed by other people on your team as being the favorite, then it becomes a negative rather than a positive. So you owe it to the high performer to give them love and recognition, and make sure you re-recruit them, that they stay engaged with the team. Again, that's how you try to categorize the people on who are most likely able to take on additional responsibilities that you are doing today in order to create time and space on your calendar. All right, I'm going to take a 2-minute break here to kind of assess how does this make sense, and does it sound exciting that you actually can create time on your calendar? I see some bobbing heads. Is that everybody would love to have some time back on the calendar. Now, would I blame you if you say right now is that that sounds great, but that's never going to happen? Yes, I would 100% expect that. I was there too. It's like, how is that even possible? That sounds 8 hours. That's a lot of time. But that's our goal. We're going to try to regain 8 hours of your calendar time back to you that you can then shift into improving and looking for opportunities in your department that will make you, that both empowers your team, which will drive engagement and performance. And at the same time, you can look at processes in order to continue to improve that. One, we talked a lot about process improvement. No matter where you go, you can't do it all yourself. You can certainly identify people within the system who are interested in it. Right? The intrinsic driver to them is challenge me, teach me, bring me along. We identify and we can train them. We can develop them to do process value stream mapping. And then you can shift the authority that when you go look at something, you do the process map first, you identify the barriers, you identify the bottlenecks, and then come back, let's sit down and see which order priority can we solve the problems, right? So that's really what the tool is about. Not to take too much more of your time because we're at the bottom of the hour. The next slides are all about how, the assessment for yourself on where you are currently. So I would recommend you that, take some time over the next days until our next coaching session. Look at what your actual is and what your ideal is. Now, if you go to the next slide after that, again, we can look for the different levels, right? We can look at it for staff, and managers, directors, and executive. It all differs a little bit. And there's a little bit of an sample here of the alpha company, right? It could be anybody, anytime, on where the executives, where the directors, the managers, staff is spending in each box, right? And we start off with Brad, the doing piece. Interesting enough, right? The executives are 60% of the time doing, but they spend 20% of their time looking into the future. Well, if you think about the staff member, right, the lowest level of the organization, they are doing 100% of the doing and really not spending a lot of time on improving, looking for opportunities or into the future. Now, you fall in the middle of that somewhere. Now, I personally think that even the executives 60% doing is a little high. They should be more like 40 to 45% doing, spend considerable amount of time in the improving opportunity and of course looking into the future. But I want you to go to the exercise. I want you to pencil it in. And the next time we have our session together, we're going to take a look at it, what it looks like for you. And then, so don't need to do a lot more at this point in time, but I would like you to start thinking about it for yourself. And this is the exercise that you can use that piece of paper at the back of it. I want you to start thinking about that and maybe even tracking it this week or next week of all the things that you do, all the tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis, and kind of write down the task and how much time it takes you to do it. And then once you have you completed that assessment over a 40, 50-hour work week, however many hours you work, we can sit down and go back over it and really create 3 columns. Is it value adding? Yes or no. Is it regulatory requirement? Yes or no. So once you have that completed, all the non-value added items on the list, the challenge would be, how can I get rid of them? If it's not regulatory required and there is no value to it, why am I still doing it? And I promise you, we all are doing things we do not need to do. It was just, you came into the position, they were doing it, therefore you were doing it. So we have to be really tough about that. What is non-value adding? It's also not a regulatory requirement. Now, when you have value added steps left over and regulatory requirement, right there, you likely have saved an X number of minutes per day that add up. The next thing of the value added steps and the regulatory requirement, the next question you have to ask yourself is that, do I need to do this? Now, in your current mindset, you might think that if I don't do it, nobody will do it. Or if I don't do it, nobody will do it as well as I can do it. We want to break that habit, that behavior. And I want you to challenge yourself and say, could somebody else do this? Not that you need that afternoon to change it and have somebody else do it. You start thinking about, could somebody else do this? Can I develop and teach and coach somebody? Can I then transfer that authority to somebody else while we measure and support them in the background? We empower that. So those are the 3 steps that you can start taking. So think about it. How much time in each of the category? How much time do I spend doing? How much time do I spend really improving things? How much time do I look at opportunities in the near future? And how much time do I think about the distant future? That's the first assessment you want to do for yourself, and be really honest. The second one is start tracking all your tasks and the things that you do on a day-to-day basis and how much time it takes. Break that down to value-added, non-value-added, and regulatory. And leave it at that, and we will have a one-to-one discussion going forward. So I'll leave it at this. Again, lots of information here. This is a building block. We will come back on our one-to-one sessions around the IDP, the scorecard, and this, because it's critically important that over the next weeks and months to go, that we get this right. But I didn't want to delay the introduction because I think the timing was right, certainly based on the conversation we have had. So I'll open it up for any comments. Let me stop the recording so we can have